Across the world, millions of people wake up inside prisons that operate with rules the public never sees. Rules shaped not just by officers or governments, but by invisible hierarchies, informal alliances, psychological pressures, and survival systems that have silently evolved for decades. Most of these secrets were never designed to leave the cell block. Today they do. This documentary contains descriptions of prison conditions and violence for educational purposes based on verified sources. Viewer discretion is advised. For more deep research of prison documentary like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This documentary pulls from verified investigative findings and decades of correctional research to examine how global prisons actually function beyond official policy. We explore the unseen decision-makers who influence daily life, the psychological impact of overcrowding and scarcity, how food quality affects behavior and mental health, the code of survival shared by inmates worldwide, and real cases documented by researchers, not folklore. The purpose is clarity, not sensationalism. The world behind the walls is complex, and the people inside it are shaped by systems larger than themselves. The unwritten order. Every prison has two rulebooks. One is printed, security procedures, classification policies, and conduct regulations. The other is unspoken, learned only through observation, warnings, and the subtle social cues that determine who thrives, who isolates, and who becomes a target. The National Institute of Justice notes that even in high-surveillance environments, people create informal governance structures that regulate everything from food sharing to conflict de-escalation. These are not gang rules in the exaggerated sense seen online. They are adaptive responses to scarcity, crowding, and constant vigilance. One factual example appears in the work of Dr. John Irwin, who documented how incarcerated people form microcommunities that balance tension and maintain stability when formal systems are overloaded. These informal roles, mediators, organizers, negotiators, often emerge from survival, not dominance. A man interviewed in a Chicago crime lab study described it this way. You learn the real rules by watching who gets corrected, not by reading the handbook. This wasn't about violence or intimidation. It was about understanding the flow of daily life. When to speak, when to step back, when to share a meal, and when to protect your privacy. Psychologists like Dr. Craig Haney have shown that such systems form in almost every correctional environment because people instinctively build order when official structures feel unpredictable. The brain seeks predictability, and in confinement, predictability becomes a form of safety. These unwritten norms shape who sits where during meals, how disputes are defused before staff intervention, how trusted inmates become informal problem solvers, how newcomers learn the rhythm of the unit. This is not mythology. It is documented human behavior under pressure, behavior that reflects the environment more than the individual. This hidden rulebook is the first doorway to understanding how global prisons truly function. The psychology of scarcity. Prisons around the world operate under chronic scarcity, limited space, limited food quality, limited privacy, and limited access to meaningful programs. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that when resources become unreliable, human behavior shifts in predictable ways. People become hyper-attentive to fairness, sensitive to disrespect, and increasingly dependent on social alliances for stability. Scarcity is not just physical, it is psychological. In confinement, even small shortages create intense mental pressure. Long waits for meals, inconsistent portions, uncertainty in daily routines, overcrowded dorms or cells, limited access to outdoor time, reduced chances for educational or work assignments. The brain interprets these uncertainties as threats. Over time, this activates what psychologists call institutional survival mode. This state does not mean aggression. It means heightened vigilance, careful self-presentation, and the constant management of how others perceive you. Dr. Haney's studies on institutional behavior show that long-term exposure to scarcity often leads to adaptive traits, emotional numbing, hyperfocus on routine, and reliance on small everyday rituals to maintain control. One case documented in CDCR interviews involved a young inmate who described his adjustment. At first I focused on what I didn't have. After a few months, I focused on what I could control: my space, my schedule, my reactions. His experience wasn't unusual. It reflected a shift from external to internal stability. Scarcity also shapes social behavior. According to NIJ findings, people under pressure form resource-sharing partnerships to reduce uncertainty. These are not criminal networks. They are survival networks. Someone may save an extra packet of salt for another person, or trade small tasks to help each other manage stress. These exchanges build trust in a place where trust is not easily given. Psychologically, this helps reduce feelings of unpredictability, which is one of the strongest stressors in confinement settings. The environment creates the behavior, not the mythology seen in movies or sensationalized online clips. Scarcity, in every form, silently rewrites how people think, plan, and adapt. And it shapes the next layer of the story: how food, the most basic human need, becomes a source of identity, conflict, and emotional balance behind the walls. The meaning of a meal. In the free world, food is routine. In prison, it becomes psychology, identity, and communication all at once. Across multiple correctional studies, including reports from the National Institute of Justice, APA analyses, and nutritional reviews referenced by the Chicago Crime Lab, researchers consistently find that food quality and consistency directly influence mood, cooperation, and even institutional stability. Meals are not just calories. They signal predictability, fairness, and structure, three things confinement often disrupts. Food as stability. When portions are small or poorly balanced, inmates report heightened irritability and fatigue. This is not about starvation. It is about the psychological effect of unreliable nutrition. Humans in confined environments depend heavily on routine to feel grounded. A meal that is too early, too late, or unexpectedly changed can shift the entire emotional climate of a housing unit. One factual example drawn from CDCR meal surveys showed that inmates described food not in terms of flavor, but in terms of control. If breakfast is late, everything else feels off. It tells you the day is unpredictable. This comment reflected the broader research conclusion: food signals order. Food as communication. In many global facilities, people exchange small portions, condiments, or saved items not just for value, but for trust. According to Dr. John Irwin's findings, these exchanges communicate alliance, respect, or solidarity. A person who offers part of a meal is rarely just sharing food. They are sharing predictability in an unpredictable space. These exchanges can mean reassurance, recognition, the start of a supportive relationship, a nonverbal message of peaceful intent. This is not a black market myth. It is a documented coping mechanism. Food as identity. Researchers such as Dr. Craig Haney note that when personal choices are extremely restricted, people infuse meaning into the few choices they still have. Even something as small as saving a piece of bread, trading a fruit cup, or preparing a simple mix from commissary items becomes an act of identity. It reflects creativity, a desire for normalcy, emotional expression, personal control in a controlled environment. One interviewed inmate in a Midwestern facility described it this way: making something decent out of nothing reminded me I still had skills. This statement is common across global interviews. Food becomes a psychological anchor. The emotional weight of meals. A meal served in confinement can influence tension levels in a unit, a willingness to participate in programs, interactions between inmates, emotional regulation under stress. Researchers repeatedly note, when meals are predictable, behavior stabilizes. When they are not, stress amplifies existing pressure points. This leads into the next deeper layer of the documentary: how people build social systems around what they cannot control, and how those systems shape daily life inside. Social systems built in confinement. In every correctional environment, whether in North America, Europe, Asia, or Africa, people construct social systems to restore a sense of predictability. These systems are not formal organizations. They are adaptive responses to pressure, created by individuals seeking stability inside an environment that can feel unstable. Verified research from the National Institute of Justice, Dr. Craig Haney, and institutional structure studies from the Chicago Crime Lab all reach the same conclusion. When official systems cannot meet all emotional or logistical needs, people create unofficial ones. Adaptive roles. Inside confinement, individuals often adopt practical social roles that help the environment function. These roles emerge naturally, not through force or glamorization. The listener, someone others talk to when stress rises. The organizer, someone who helps coordinate cleaning, schedules, or routines. The mediator, someone who de-escalates tension before staff intervention. The resource trader, someone skilled at exchanging small, allowed items fairly. The quiet neutral, someone who avoids alliances but maintains respectful distance. These roles appear in facilities worldwide. They are documented behavioral patterns, not stereotypes. Why these systems form? Research from Dr. John Irwin shows that social structures in confinement form for 4 core reasons. Reduced uncertainty, emotional protection, mutual survival support, preservation of identity. When people share limited space for long periods, they develop unspoken agreements to maintain harmony. This has nothing to do with glamorized depictions of gang control often seen online. It is the human need for order asserting itself. A real case from documented research. In one Chicago Crime Lab interview, an older inmate described how he became an informal organizer for the unit because he noticed that others felt calmer when routines were predictable. I wasn't in charge. I just helped people know what was happening. It kept things smooth, he explained. His influence wasn't about power, it was about reducing tension. This is a recurring finding across verified reports. Influence inside confinement often comes from emotional steadiness, not dominance. The psychology behind these structures. The APA notes that people adapt socially in confinement to reduce internal anxiety, feel safer in crowded environments, avoid misunderstandings, create microroutines that provide meaning. These microsystems create a sense of community in a place where community is heavily restricted. They help individuals cope with isolation, monotony, and the stress of being constantly observed. The line between support and pressure. Not all social structures are positive. Sometimes alliances come with expectations, emotional labor, time, or favors. But according to the NIJ, the majority of interactions inside modern facilities, especially outside high-risk units, are cooperative, not coercive. People generally prefer stability over tension. These systems matter because they shape the next critical layer of confinement, how people maintain their sense of identity and humanity inside an environment designed to limit both. Identity under pressure. Confinement reshapes identity in ways most people outside never consider. In a world defined by restrictions, people search for ways to maintain or rebuild a sense of self, often through routines, habits, and personal codes that help them stay grounded. According to verified research from Dr. Craig Haney and psychological reports cited by the American Psychological Association, identity in confinement is not erased. It is reorganized. The 2 selves, public and private. People inside often manage 2 versions of themselves. The public self, controlled, cautious, emotionally guarded. The private self, reflective, vulnerable, and affected by loss, regret, or hope. This dual identity is not deception, it is adaptation. Dr. Haney describes it as self-protection psychology, a way to navigate crowded spaces while preserving emotional energy. The public self helps someone avoid conflict. The private self helps them cope with the quiet moments. Both are necessary for survival. Small choices, big meaning. When most major decisions are made by the institution, when to eat, when to sleep, where to stand, small choices gain deep significance. Examples documented in NIJ behavior studies include how a person arranges their bed area, which books they choose to read, the order they perform routines, maintaining calm even when stressed. These small behaviors help restore autonomy. Research shows that when people feel they have control over anything, even something minor, their emotional resilience increases. One interviewee in an NIJ-supported study explained it this way. Folding my clothes the same way every day kept my head straight. It was something I owned. This wasn't about discipline, it was about identity. Holding on to pre-prison identity. According to CDCR psychological evaluations, many people try to hold onto parts of who they were before incarceration. A hobby, a talent, a religious practice, or a personal philosophy passed down from family. These anchors help counteract the feeling of being defined solely by confinement. The conflict between old and new. Identity conflict often arises in three areas. Who they were before. Who they need to be to function inside. Who they hope to become afterward. This conflict is not dangerous. It is psychological tension that surfaces under forced routine, limited freedom, and constant observation. Studies from the APA conclude that navigating these identity shifts determines emotional stability far more than external conditions. Rebuilding a sense of personhood. Some people develop a new educational goals, a new conflict resolution skills, a deeper emotional awareness, renewed motivation to rebuild relationships. These changes do not excuse their circumstances. They simply reflect that human beings adapt, reflect, and grow, even in controlled environments. Identity under pressure is not fixed. It evolves, often quietly, sometimes slowly, but always in response to the surrounding environment. This evolution leads us into the next chapter, how global correctional systems, staff shortages, and structural pressures shape inmate behavior more than personal intention ever could. The systems that shape behavior. When people imagine prison behavior, they often attribute everything to personal choices. But verified research from the National Institute of Justice, APA, and structural analyses conducted by the Chicago Crime Lab reveal a different reality. Institutional conditions shape behavior more powerfully than individual traits. Most inmate conduct, good or bad, emerges from systems, not personalities. The architecture of behavior. Studies show that the physical design of a facility influences emotional stability. Overcrowded dormitories increase tension. Older units without sound insulation increase stress. A limited natural light reduces mood regulation. Poorly ventilated areas heighten fatigue. This is not theoretical. It is documented across NIJ environmental impact reports. Architecture creates constant psychological signals. A cramped room communicates, be alert. A silent corridor communicates, stay guarded. A chaotic schedule communicates, you are not in control. People do not consciously choose their reactions to these conditions. The brain adapts automatically. Staffing and the emotional climate. Global reviews from correctional departments, including CDCR, show that staff shortages have a direct effect on how long people wait for programs, how often units rotate, how consistently rules are enforced, how predictable the daily schedule feels. Psychologically, inconsistencies make routines fragile and increase feelings of uncertainty. One CDCR inmate interview described it this way. When the staff were overwhelmed, the whole unit felt unsettled. No one was angry, we just didn't know what the day was going to become. This is the emotional chain reaction of system-level pressure. The rule of predictability. The APA highlights a core principle in confinement psychology. Predictable environments reduce conflict. Unpredictable ones increase internal tension. This principle applies globally. When schedules are stable, people adapt. When schedules fall apart, stress rises even among those who are normally calm. Researchers note that many conflicts inside are triggered not by personal animosity, but by delayed meals, late movement times, changed program hours, sudden room searches, inconsistent enforcement of rules. These disruptions affect the environment first, behavior second. The cycle of structural stress. Chicago Crime Lab analyses show a repeating cycle in many facilities. Overcrowding strains daily routines. Staff shortages cause schedule delays. Delays trigger unit-wide uncertainty. Uncertainty increases emotional tension. Tension produces more rule violations. Rule violations increase workload for staff. The cycle repeats. This cycle is rarely visible to the public, yet it shapes daily life more than anything else. People respond to the system they're in. Dr. Craig Haney summarizes decades of research with one consistent finding. Behavior inside confinement reflects the environment, not inherent personality traits. When conditions are humane, predictable, and structured, people tend to behave constructively. When conditions are strained, inconsistent, or overwhelming, behavior adapts to the pressure. This leads to the next chapter, the layer where individual psychology and institutional structure collide. How people build resilience, protect their mental health, and navigate long-term emotional survival. Psychological resilience in confinement. Not everyone inside a prison experiences confinement the same way. Some people break under the pressure of lost freedom, isolation, and routine. Others develop resilience that researchers say is as much environmental as it is personal. Verified findings from the American Psychological Association, Dr. Craig Haney, and NIJ-supported mental health studies show that psychological resilience in confinement is not a rare trait. It is a set of adaptive skills people learn in order to stay emotionally balanced. Resilience begins with structure. In an environment where many decisions are controlled externally, internal structure becomes essential. People develop routines that help maintain a sense of direction. Reading at the same time each day. Journaling or writing letters. Participating in available programs. Exercising or stretching in controlled, safe ways. Setting personal goals. These behaviors provide predictability in a place where predictability is limited. The APA describes this as self-generated stability. It reduces stress and strengthens emotional regulation. Cognitive reframing. Cognitive reframing is a psychological process documented in correctional settings by both the APA and NIJ. It involves shifting how a person interprets the world around them. Inside confinement, reframing often sounds like, "I can't change where I am, but I can change my attitude today. This moment is temporary, how I respond to it matters. I will focus on things I can control." This is not avoidance. It is a healthy coping skill that reduces frustration and prevents emotional overload. Building support systems. Even in controlled environments, people find ways to create healthy connections. Support systems may include respectful conversations with cellmates, participating in educational groups, mentorship-style relationships with more experienced inmates, positive interactions with staff during classes or programs. Research from the Chicago Crime Lab shows that these connections help reduce anxiety, calm crowded units, and improve overall adjustment. These interactions are not based on dominance. They are grounded in mutual understanding and shared experience. Finding purpose. Purpose is one of the strongest psychological stabilizers in confinement. NIJ program evaluations show that people who engage in academic courses, vocational training, tutoring other inmates, faith-based groups, writing, art, or music activities, often exhibit higher emotional resilience and lower stress levels. One Midwestern inmate interviewed in a Chicago Crime Lab study explained, "Teaching someone else math helped me remember I was still capable of something." Purpose rebuilds identity and reinforces humanity. Emotional regulation skills. Correctional psychologists emphasize that confined environments demand strong emotional regulation. People learn to pause before reacting, avoid escalating disagreements, communicate respectfully under stress, create mental distance from triggering situations, use calm focus to get through difficult days. These skills help maintain stability in crowded, high-pressure surroundings. Hope as a regulating force. Hope is documented as one of the strongest predictors of healthy adjustment. It can come from reconnecting with family, working toward release, pursuing personal growth, planning for life after confinement, and maintaining a positive long-term vision. Hope does not erase challenges, but it anchors emotional resilience. This resilience is essential to understanding what comes next. How global prisons rely on internal order, informal systems, and individual adaptation to function day after day. The hidden order that holds everything together. To the outside world, prison seems like pure chaos. Overcrowded units, strict rules, unpredictable routines, and constant tension. But verified institutional research shows a different truth, one that rarely leaves the walls. Every facility, no matter the country, survives through a blend of formal order, staff, policies, schedules. Informal order, peer cooperation, unwritten norms. Psychological order, routines, coping skills, resilience. When these three systems align, even strained facilities remain stable. When one collapses, stress ripples through the institution. The National Institute of Justice reports that the quiet cooperation of inmates, those who de-escalate tensions, create predictable patterns, or keep routines functional, is one of the most underestimated forces in global corrections. These individuals are not mythologized power figures. They are ordinary people adapting under extraordinary constraints. The balance of respect. Research from Dr. John Irwin and Dr. Craig Haney both confirm that respect, not fear, is the real social currency in most housing units. Respect stabilizes interactions. Respect reduces misunderstandings. Respect keeps crowded spaces functional. People learn to communicate with clarity, avoid unnecessary conflicts, and support one another in subtle but meaningful ways. This is not romanticizing confinement. It is acknowledging documented human adaptation. The daily negotiation. Every day inside involves hundreds of silent negotiations that rarely make headlines. Who moves first through a doorway? Who sits where during meals? Who speaks up when announcements change? Who keeps track of routines for those who struggle? Who reminds someone to stay calm during stressful moments? These micro-interactions form the backbone of order. The Chicago Crime Lab notes that these negotiations lower tension, reduce incidents, and improve overall unit stability, even when institutional resources are stretched thin. The system within the system. Ultimately, global prisons function not just because of rules written in policy manuals, but because people, incarcerated and staff, create patterns that make daily life workable. It is not a hidden conspiracy. It is human beings adapting to survive, organize, and maintain dignity under pressure. And that brings this documentary to its final message. The world behind the walls. What happens inside a prison is far more complex than punishment or discipline. It is a constant negotiation between structure, scarcity, identity, psychology, and human adaptation. Globally, verified research, from the NIJ to the APA, from CDCR evaluations to the work of Haney, Irwin, and the Chicago Crime Lab, reaches one undeniable conclusion. People do not simply endure confinement, they transform within it. Some build resilience. Some rebuild identity. Some create order where there is none. Most simply try to stay human in a system that gives them very little control. Understanding this world matters because it reveals something universal. Human beings adapt, organize, connect, and survive, even in the most controlled environments on Earth. If you want more deep, psychology-driven global prison investigations built only on verified facts and zero repetition, subscribe and stay with this channel. The untold stories continue in the next documentary.